Welcome back, and thank you for joining in today's episode, which today is actually going to be a North Carolina legend. So we're going to be diving into that today. And of course, before we get started, if you enjoy this type of content, the spooky, the scary, the paranormal, true crime, military stories, legends, myths, all types of those, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button to stay up to date. And of course, if there is a story you'd like me to research or to discover even, make sure you leave a comment down below so we always stay up to date. And then Monday through Friday, every week, I do have YouTube shorts that come up starting in the afternoon Central Time. So I think 1 o'clock is our standard time that they start kicking off. And those are also little micro stories which get turned into bigger stories. But with that out of the way, I hope you enjoy. So sit back, relax, and get ready to find out about the Devil's Tramping Grounds. Alright, let's start with just a little intro / background about this. So let's get into it. In the low rolling hills of southern Chatham County, south of Siler City, in the woods near Harper Crossroads, lies one of the most famous haunted places in North Carolina. The Devil's Tramping Ground is a mysterious, perfectly round, and absolute barren circle about 40 feet in diameter in the pine woods of Chatham County. Not a tree, not a flower, no lowly weed, not even a single blade of grass will grow in the limits of the circle. Seeds sowed there refuse to sprout. Any vegetation transplanted there will wither and die. And what's even more strange, any object left in the circle before dusk will have been violently moved outside its bounds by dawn. Dogs tuck their tails in between their legs and whimper when brought near the circle. The frightened animals will dig their heels into the sand, refusing to be brought into the circle. Men have tried to spend nights inside the circle, but no one has successfully remained sane throughout the night. Something they see on their vigil drives them out of their wits, never to recover, for the Devil's Tramping Ground has earned its name. It's said that there is where the devil himself walks at night. In his tramping ground, the devil spends his nights pacing around and around in a circle and turning his bitter mind towards ways to bring human souls to damnation. It's scorching heat of his cloven hoofprints that kills the vegetation and has rendered the soil barren. He angrily brushes aside anything left in his path, his great strength easily able to toss aside even the heaviest of objects. When he walks in his private spot on earth, the devil drops the illusion with which he disguises himself when he appears to man. In his natural state, the face of this fallen angel is so horrible that no man can see it and remain sane. The mystery of the Devil's Tramping Grounds have been known since Chatham County was founded shortly before the War for Independence. From generation to generation, the story has been passed down. And despite efforts by scientists to explain this barren patch of land, no satisfying explanation has ever been given. So, if you're driving on State Road 1100 in rural Chatham County at night, and you pass a curve in the road where there's a narrow path leading off into the woods, when you see a shadowy figure moving between the trees, it's best to just drive away as fast as you possibly can and just never look back until you are long, long gone. But there is more to this story. So let's find the scary truth behind the Devil's Tramping Ground. Other explanations have been given for the cause of this barren patch of woods over the years, including the story that the place was the site of a battle between two rival tribes of American Indians. Supposedly, the blood of those killed soaked the ground so thoroughly that nothing would ever grow there again. The losing tribe then fled from the mainland entirely onto the Outer Banks and became the Croatian tribe that befriended the lost colonists. Others say that the site is the burial ground of the great Indian chief named Croatian, and that the gods keep the spot barren out of respect. The idea has also been put forth that the soil in the Devil's Tramping Ground is barren because the circle was the site of a UFO landing, and the strange radiation from the extraterrestrial engine has just permanently exterminated all the grass. Most recently, though, a sign was posted at the site renaming the Devil's Tramping Ground as the Chatham County Vortex, and claiming that the site is the anchor of Magdalene Crystal Column of energy. Magdalene energy is an idea that has emerged out of England in the past decade. This theory proposes that the planet is surrounded by a web of divine mag-ray energy that is an expression of a divine feminine presence, bundling this idea with the early English tradition of Jesus traveling to British Isles at some point in his life, while also incorporating this into a mysticism based on Jungian psychology, sorry if I butchered that, and feminist readings of Arthurian legend. So there's a lot to go on there, but what might be the most interesting for the history of the Devil's Tramping Ground is all of this is that for the first time the spot is being associated with a positive supernatural force instead of a negative supernatural force. This is sort of rereading is one of the things that makes the devil. This sort of rereading is one of the things that make the Devil's Tramping Ground such an interesting spot. It's an example of how once a place is identified as being supernatural or holy, the identification can persist even beyond the culture that created the original association. The idea of a sacred place persists even as what the sacredness means to be reinterpreted as new cultures and new contexts move into the area. The original naming of the Devil's Tramping Ground is part of a deep American folk tradition. The devil seems to have come to Chatham County with the Scotch-Irish settlers who arrived in North Carolina during the 18th century, populating the course of Cape Fear River, the Uharis, and the Appalachians. The settlers were mainly immigrants from the Ulster and the counties along the border between England and Scotland, and the devil was very much a part of the culture they brought along with them. Obsession with supernaturals have been running at peak in parts of the United Kingdom for a long time, even before the bulk of Scotch-Irish immigration to the New World. Scottish-born James I, who ascended to the unified throne of England and Scotland in 1603, was obsessed with witches and demons and even wrote a book about demonology. Knowing a crowd pleaser when he saw it, and knowing who was the right crowd to please, William Shakespeare is said to have written the supernatural elements into Macbeth with an eye towards superstitious kings. Belief in witches, ghosts, and goblins was a genuine cultural fixation, and this demon-haunted world came with those settlers to America. Much of Southern American folklore and folk music owes its shape to the Scotch-Irish, and the devil was a central part of that story. The culture remains with us also in our place names. For the Scotch-Irish, any strange and dangerous places would often be named for the devil. These names are all over North Carolina. Apart from the Devil's Tramping Ground, North Carolina has the Devil's Rock, a Devil's Courthouse, 7 Devils, Kill Devil Hill, Devil's Branch, Devil's Chimney, Devil's Nest, 4 Devil's Elbow, 2 Devil's Forks, a Devil's Knob, and even the Devil's Tater Patch. That's a lot of devils in North Carolina. For whatever reason, the small barren patch in the woods was at some point identified as being in some way supernatural. And as the cultural context around the spot has shifted, the idea has persisted even as the stories around it has changed. In the Scotch-Irish tradition that originally named the spot, the devil is a complicated character who is seen as often as a comic figure, as he is an existential threat to human existence. There are numerous stories of the devil being outsmarted by mortals who trick him into using his powers against himself. This complexity has perhaps sadly diminished quite a bit since the Devil's Tramping Ground was first named. Our expectations for the devils have changed, and the convergence of popular culture and folklore has played a large role in this. After 40 years of movies like The Exorcist, when the when the devil bothers to make a trip to the surface, we're counting on him to do something more impressive than just walk around in a circle. This may be part of the reason why the stories around the spot have shifted so much in recent years. And so the threat of the devil in the woods has been replaced with other threats. The interpretation of the site had been seen through the lens of dark powers associated with Native Americans and much of white American folklore, where the complexities of guilt and the need to establish psychological legitimacy to take the native lands often cast the first inhabitants of the country as a supernatural force that needed to be eliminated, stories which give a sense of legitimization to Europeans possessing this land. Similarly, the story of the Devil's Tramping Ground as a site for UFO landing may be a way of dealing with Cold War anxieties and the rapid changing in technology and social structure in the later half of the 20th century. The threat of an uncontrollable forces that could completely disrupt someone's life shifted as the cultural context through which life was experienced shifted. The threat went from being demons to being aliens. The unseen forces changed from magic to radiation. Through it all, the mystical spot in the woods of Chatham County remains. Whether or not the latest incarnation of the Devil's Tramping Ground as a source of Magdalene Crystal energy will persist, and whether the culture has shifted enough so that once feared ideas of the supernatural forces are now being embraced, still remain to be seen. As for what's happening with the Devil's Tramping Ground itself, well, most visitors going to the spot expecting a spectacle of supernatural horrors of mag-ray enlightenment will find the spot slightly disappointing. The barrenness of the soil seems to result from the place being a natural occurring salt lick, a phenomenon not at all uncommon in the pine forests of Carolinas. The site has also shrunken significantly this century, the diameter now measuring around 20 feet. The salt content of the soil seems to be naturally fading enough so that grass now grows freely in the circle. The chief thing keeping the clearing free of vegetation is the constant tramping it receives, not from the devil, but from visitors and the local kids who use the place as a party spot. It also seems that the devil, the aliens, or whoever else was keeping the spot clean has moved on, as objects left in the circle invariably just remain there. The site frequently abounds with empty Slim Jim wrappers and beer cans. A rusty refrigerator sat in the circle for a number of years, which was eventually hauled away by human hands on the back of every mundane truck. It may just be that devil just gave up. The proliferation of modern litter became too much for even the Prince of Darkness to cope with. So there you have it. Whether or not you believe in the paranormal, the supernatural, the mysticisms, wherever, it still begs the question of what was causing this for so many years and decades and centuries even. What made this spot be barren and for so many things to be put in, violently be thrown out, remains unseen, as now it doesn't seem to have that same mysticism, and it almost appears as though they're changing the spot. They being the county or those who visit. But regardless of what is happening now, it's still incredibly weird and not necessarily scary, though some of these stories sound very intimidating. It still remains unseen as what was causing so much to happen inside this little circle that would cause things to be thrown out for people to become not sane anymore. People not being able to spend the night without having some severe mental issues afterwards. So let me know what you think down below. And of course, I will see you next Monday for another episode within Sig Story Time. Of course, I am Sig, and if you enjoy this type of content, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button to stay up to date with all of the content coming. But until next time, everyone, take care and have a wonderful day.